The cold stones of the Red Keep's dungeons bit into Eddard Stark's skin as he sat alone in silence. For days now, he had been left with nothing but water and stale bread, and even those felt like insults rather than mercy. The silence had been broken only by the rats and the faint screams of other prisoners, until today. A guard stomped down the corridor, his armor clanking loud enough to raise the dead. Behind him came a thin man dressed in red and gold, Lord Varys. The spider moved with soft steps, like a shadow that whispered instead of walking. "My Lord Hand," Varys said softly, voice oily, "you must prepare yourself." The boy king grows restless and crueler. Ned stared at him. "What news?" Varys hesitated. "Your son, Robb. He has been taken." The Lannisters lured him into a false parley near the Trident. Jaime was there. "It was a trap." Ned's heart stopped. "You lie." "I wish I did, Lord Stark, but the young wolf is now in chains." For a moment Ned forgot the pain in his leg, the hunger in his belly. His eldest son, his proud Robb, was no longer free, no longer fighting in the north. He was here in the hands of Joffrey Baratheon. Or rather, in the claws of Cersei Lannister. "What do they want?" Ned asked, voice rough. Varys tilted his head. "A choice." Later that evening they dragged Ned out, still in chains, and brought him before the throne. The court was smaller now, quieter. Many nobles had left, uneasy with Joffrey's madness. But Cersei sat smug, and Littlefinger stood at the side like a vulture waiting for something to die. Then he saw him, Robb, beaten, blood on his mouth, one eye nearly swollen shut, but standing tall, trying not to show fear. "Father," Robb said, breathing hard. Joffrey clapped like a child. "Isn't this sweet?" "A family reunion. But sadly it comes with a test." He rose from the Iron Throne like a snake uncoiling. "Lord Eddard Stark, traitor to the crown, you've been given mercy once before. Now your fate depends on your tongue and your loyalty. What do you want?" Ned asked, teeth clenched. Joffrey smiled with sick pleasure. "Say I am the rightful king. Denounce your claim about my mother and uncle. Bow before me, or watch your son's head fall before your eyes." The silence in the throne room turned thick, like the walls were holding their breath. Robb shook his head. "Don't do it, father. I'm not worth it. You know what they are." But Ned's hands shook. In one corner of the room, Sansa wept silently. Arya was nowhere to be found. Varys had said she escaped. But what good was that now? "You have until sunrise," Joffrey said, yawning. "Either the wolf bows, or the cub dies." The guards pulled Robb away, ignoring his struggling. Ned stood staring at the boy king, hatred burning in his chest. But deeper than hatred was helplessness. Back in his cell, he sat in the dark again. This time, there was no silence. Just a voice in his head. "Which son do you save, Eddard Stark? And how many must die for honor?" The cell felt smaller now, as if the very walls were closing in, pushing against Ned's chest, making it harder to breathe. He had faced death before, on the battlefield, in the snow, with steel in his hands and honor in his heart. But never like this. Never where the price wasn't his own life, but his son's, Robb, his firstborn. The boy who rode horses before he could walk steady. The boy who carried a wooden sword at his hip, even when he wasn't tall enough to reach the dinner table. Ned had taught him everything, how to fight, how to lead, how to rule, but he had never taught him how to die. The torchlight outside flickered as another set of boots came down the corridor. This time it was not Varys, but a boy, a squire barely older than Bran. His hands trembled as he held out a rolled parchment. "It's from the Queen," he mumbled, eyes on the ground. Ned took it slowly, watching the boy disappear again into the darkness. The letter was short. "Say the words. Kneel before Joffrey. Or tomorrow the North loses its heir. No seal, no signature. Just a sentence as sharp as Valyrian steel." He crushed the letter in his fist and closed his eyes. His thoughts swirled like a winter storm. He had once told Catelyn that he'd die for his children. But now he realized dying wasn't the hard part. The hard part was living after making a choice that would stain your soul. If he lied, if he said Joffrey was the true king, it would save Robb. but it would damn the truth. And worse, it would give the Lannisters more power to twist the realm. But if he stayed silent, he'd see his son's head roll on the marble floor, and that image would haunt him until the stranger came to claim him. A whisper came from the shadows. Not words, just the soft rustle of robes. Still no sleep, Lord Stark? Varys again. Ned didn't open his eyes. Do you ever leave this place? Varys chuckled softly. Not when the game is this bloody. What do they truly want? Ned asked. Cersei already has the crown. Robb is just a message now. Why do they need my words? They want to break you, Varys replied. They want the North to kneel by watching its greatest wolf crawl. It's not about truth anymore. It's about theater, a play where the villain becomes the hero and the honest man is the fool. And if I play their game, your son lives for now. But you lose yourself. Ned stood slowly, his knees stiff. Is there no other path? Varys looked at him, pity in his eyes. There's always another path. But it's darker, riskier. He paused, then leaned closer. Arya is free. She's alive. We smuggled her out and there are whispers that Yoren of the Night's Watch has hidden her among the recruits. That name gave Ned a flicker of hope. Like a candle in the cold. If Robb dies, Varys continued, you still have daughters. You still have Bran, Rickon. The North remembers Lord Stark, but they need you alive. You must think carefully. Ned sat down again, head in his hands. Dawn wasn't far now, and so the night stretched on, each hour heavier than the last. When the guards came for him again, the sun had just started to creep over the towers of the Red Keep. Its golden light felt mocking. They dragged him to the courtyard this time, not the throne room. A crowd had gathered, lords, ladies, spies in plain clothes, and Joffrey, smug and cruel on a raised platform, with Cersei whispering at his side. And there, kneeling, was Robb. His hands were bound, sword to his back. 2 gold cloaks stood behind him. Robb looked up and met Ned's eyes, and with a small shake of his head, he mouthed something. Don't. Joffrey stood. Eddard Stark, final chance. Say it, say I am king, or your son dies. Time slowed. Ned felt the weight of every eye, every breath. He opened his mouth. And wait! A voice from the far side of the crowd. Everyone turned. A cloaked figure stepped forward, slim, hooded, too small for a man, too bold for a servant. Ned's heart skipped. Arya, he whispered under his breath, but no, it wasn't her. The figure raised their hands and dropped a dagger to the floor. All eyes locked onto it. The guards tensed. Joffrey scowled. Seize them! Cersei snapped, but chaos was already spreading. And in that 1 second of distraction, Robb moved like a wolf in a snare, biting its own leg off. He lunged, steel clashed. Ned's choice would have to wait, because now blood was about to answer what honor could not. Steel flashed in the morning sun. Robb twisted as hard as he could, slamming his shoulder into the guard beside him. The sword meant for his neck scraped across his back instead, opening a shallow cut, but sparing his life. He dropped to the ground, rolled, and in one motion kicked the guard's legs out from under him. The crowd gasped, some screaming, others frozen in disbelief. The mysterious figure darted forward, seizing the fallen dagger. In the chaos, the second gold cloak raised his blade to strike Robb. But the hooded figure was already there, slashing across the man's leg, sending him crumpling with a cry. Guards! Cersei shrieked. Kill them all! Joffrey stood frozen for a moment, watching with wide eyes as the ceremony spiraled into chaos. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had imagined Ned Stark begging. He had imagined Robb's head falling and the North finally kneeling. Instead, Robb was on his feet, bloodied and panting, dagger in hand. The crowd was panicking, some nobles pushing back, others running. Knights drew their swords. And from somewhere in the confusion, a torch fell into a stack of banners, lighting them aflame. The courtyard filled with smoke and screams. Ned tried to move, but his chains dragged him down. 2 guards blocked his path. He could only watch as his son fought for his life. The hooded figure, who moved far too quick and clean for a common thief, grabbed Robb by the arm. This way! The voice was low and commanding, male, northern, familiar. They disappeared into the crowd as the gold cloak scrambled to restore order. Ned staggered forward, pushing into one of the guards. "Your Grace," a knight cried. "Shall we pursue?" But Cersei had vanished behind her Lannister guards, dragging Joffrey with her. The Queen wasn't interested in fighting, not when her precious boy might bleed. In the chaos, Varys appeared at Ned's side like a ghost. He quickly unlocked one of the shackles. "This is the only opening you'll get," he hissed. Ned narrowed his eyes. "Who helped him?" Varys didn't answer. He removed the other shackle and passed Ned a hidden blade. "The dungeons are crawling with Lannisters. You won't make it far unless someone keeps them busy." "I'm not running," Ned growled. "Then fight," Varys whispered. "But don't waste your second chance." And like that he disappeared again. Ned looked around. The crowd had cleared, but the smoke still hung thick in the air. Fires burned along the edges of the courtyard. Somewhere above, bells began to toll. Not for a death, not yet, but as a signal of panic in the city. From behind him, a gold cloak charged. Ned ducked and drove the dagger up into the man's stomach. Blood soaked his hand, warm and sticky. He didn't wait to watch him fall. His legs burned, his old injuries aching. But he forced himself to run. He moved through stone halls he once walked with pride, now like a fugitive, hiding in the castle he once served. Around each corner he expected to see Robb's body, or his own fate. But then, voices, two of them, he ducked behind a pillar. "I should have cut the boy's throat when we had him," one said. "Sir Meryn Trant, by the sound of it. Joffrey lost his nerve," another spat. "Queen's orders were clear." "Doesn't matter. They'll be found. This city eats wolves." Ned slid away, deeper into the Red Keep, toward the servants' tunnels he remembered from years ago, where old secrets whispered behind the walls. As he moved, he heard the city outside waking in fear, bells shouting, steel against steel. Word was spreading. The North's heir had escaped execution. The hand of the king was missing, and the boy king had lost control in front of the court. Back in the shadows of the black cells, Robb crouched with the hooded man. "Who are you?" Robb whispered, holding his side where he'd been slashed. The figure pulled back his hood, grey eyes, thick black beard. "Uncle Benjen." Robb stared, unable to speak. "I couldn't let you die like that," Benjen said softly. "Your father's too proud to beg, and Joffrey's too mad to keep promises. They were going to kill you, no matter what. But you disappeared beyond the wall." Benjen shook his head. "There's no time. You need to get out of the city. Arya's already gone. Sansa's trapped in the lion's den. And your father—" His voice faltered. "He may not make it." Robb stood, trembling with anger and confusion. "Then I'm going to get him." "I'm not leaving without him." Benjen stared at him. "You sound just like your father, and somewhere in the depths of King's Landing, Ned Stark, bleeding and alone, turned a corner and came face to face with the last person he ever expected. Littlefinger, smiling. "Going somewhere, Lord Stark?" he said, drawing a blade. Littlefinger's blade glinted in the torchlight, thin and elegant, like its owner. He stood with his usual smirk, eyes gleaming with amusement, as if Ned's escape was just another line in a joke, only he understood. "You've got the look of a man crawling out of his grave." "Stark," he said, casually twirling the dagger. "But I wonder, is it revenge you're after, or redemption?" Ned didn't answer. He was still bleeding from the shoulder, and the small blade Varys had given him was no match for the Valyrian steel dagger Littlefinger held with practiced grace. "I should have slit your throat back when you betrayed me in the brothel," Ned muttered, stepping slowly to the side, trying to get closer to the wall. Anything to stop the blood loss or steady himself. Littlefinger laughed softly. "Oh, Ned, still clinging to honor like it's armor. You really don't understand how the game works, do you?" Ned lunged. Quick, desperate, Littlefinger dodged, fluid as a snake, and swept his leg forward, knocking Ned off his feet. He hit the stone hard, vision spinning. "This is where your story ends, Lord Stark," Littlefinger said, stepping closer. "But don't worry. I'll tell Robb it was quick, maybe even heroic. Something fitting for a fool who never learned how to lie." But then a whistling sound cut through the air. Thunk! Littlefinger froze mid-step, looking down. An arrow protruded from his chest, just under his collarbone. His smirk twitched, then vanished. He dropped the blade, collapsed. Ned looked up. Robb stood at the end of the hall, bow still in hand, panting hard. Behind him, Benjen was already moving toward Ned, pulling him to his feet. "Father," Robb breathed. Rushing forward, Ned almost collapsed again, from relief, from blood loss, from seeing his son alive when he had already buried him in his mind. "You shouldn't be here," Ned whispered. "They'll hunt you both." "We're not leaving without you," Robb said, helping him stand. "This city doesn't deserve another Stark's corpse." Benjen leaned against the wall, glancing down at Littlefinger's body. "Shame. I always thought he'd die richer." But the moment was short-lived. Shouts echoed from the stairwell. The Lannisters had noticed the chaos was more than a riot. Someone was missing. Someone important. Benjen grabbed Ned's other arm. "We have to go, now." They slipped through a servant tunnel, barely wide enough for 2 men, let alone 3. The walls stank of mildew and rats, but it was better than open halls. Every turn they took, they expected crossbows, blades, fire. Robb carried most of his father's weight now, the blood from Ned's shoulder soaking his sleeve. But the boy's face was cold, steady. There was no fear in his eyes, only purpose. He wasn't a boy anymore. They reached a small wooden hatch leading out into the narrow alleys behind the Red Keep. Benjen cracked it open slowly. Moonlight. No guards in sight. "We move fast," Benjen whispered. "I have a horse stashed outside the city. We'll ride north till our legs give out." But as they stepped into the alley, a sound stopped them cold. Clapping, slow, mocking. "You didn't think it'd be that easy, did you?" Cersei. She stood at the far end of the alley, flanked by 6 Lannister guards. She wore no crown now, just a red cloak and a look of pure hatred. "I should have killed you both at the gate," she said, stepping forward. "But no, I gave your father a choice. And still he spat in my face." She drew a dagger from her waist and pointed it at Robb. "So now I take everything." Robb didn't flinch. "You've taken nothing. You've only made enemies, and one day we'll bury you for it." Cersei raised her hand. The guards drew their swords. Benjen pulled his own blade. "Get ready." But just as the guards moved forward, another sound rang out. Hooves. From the side alley, a blur of dark fur and growling fury exploded into the crowd. A dire wolf, snarling and bloodthirsty, tore into the guards with savage precision. "Grey Wind!" Robb cried. The wolf was a shadow of death. It ripped into one guard's throat, then leapt for another, its jaws soaked in red. The alley turned into chaos. Benjen pushed Ned behind a crate, covering him. Robb stood with his back to his father, sword in hand. Cersei stumbled back, face pale now. "Kill that beast!" But Grey Wind was faster, smarter, mad with rage, and in the madness. The Starks vanished. By the time the Lannisters regrouped, the alley was empty. The wolf gone, the crates broken. The North had escaped the jaws of the lion, for now. The river mist clung to Ned's face, like cold fingers, as the small boat glided silently through the dark waters beneath the walls of King's Landing. Robb rowed with steady arms, his jaw clenched tight, while Benjen sat at the bow, keeping watch for patrols. Grey Wind trotted silently along the muddy bank, a ghost in the fog. Ned lay on his back, swaddled in an old cloak to slow the bleeding, his head propped against a sack of stolen grain. His breath was shallow, every bump of the boat sending new pain through his body. Yet his mind was sharper than ever, sharper than it had been in years. He had looked death in the face, again, and this time it was his son who had pulled him back from the abyss. But he also knew what their escape meant. Joffrey would not forgive it. Cersei would not forget it. And the Iron Throne would not stop hunting them, not now, not ever. "We need to send word to Winterfell," Ned rasped. "Tell them to prepare for war." Robb didn't look at him. "War is already coming." "We just lit the first fire." Benjen turned back. "We'll head to the Riverlands. Lay low until you can stand again." "No," Ned growled, trying to sit up. "We ride north, now. You won't survive a week in the saddle like this," Benjen said firmly. "You're bleeding out, Ned." "I don't care," he snapped. "Catelyn needs to know her sons are alive." Bran and Rickon are alone, and Sansa, God's helper. She's still in that den of snakes. Robb stopped rowing for a moment. The oars rested gently on the water. They'll use her now, he said quietly. As bait to draw us back, or worse, to punish you. Ned closed his eyes. His daughter's face, soft, innocent, eager to be queen, flashed in his mind. He had failed her. He had failed all of them. We will get her back, he whispered. No matter what it takes. Suddenly, Benjen raised a hand. Quiet! They all froze. Voices. Hooves. A patrol rode along the riverbank just ahead, torches flickering like fireflies in the fog. Grey wind melted into the brush. Turn the boat, Benjen ordered. But Robb shook his head. No time, they've seen us, a shout rang out. The Lannister banner flapped above the helmets of 5 riders. Benjen leapt from the boat, sword already drawn. Get him out of here! I'll hold them! Uncle? Robb shouted, reaching for him, but Benjen was already gone, charging up the embankment, howling like a Northman possessed. Steel rang out and the riders scattered. Grey wind joined the chaos, leaping into the fight like a demon unleashed. Row, Ned barked. Row, Robb, now! Robb gritted his teeth and pushed the oars deep into the water, powering through the current. Behind them, the sound of battle faded, swallowed by the river and the night. By sunrise, they reached the edge of the Blackwater Rush, where it opened into the vast marshlands. Ned was drifting in and out of consciousness, fever creeping in. Robb pulled the boat ashore and gently lifted his father onto the grass. I'll find shelter, Robb said. You rest, Ned caught his son's wrist. You did well, Robb. You saved me. Robb met his father's eyes, and for the first time, the hard mask cracked. I thought I'd lost you. Ned gave him a faint smile. You almost did. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. You're not a boy anymore, Robb, he said hoarsely. You're the Stark in Winterfell now, Robb swallowed. Not yet. Not while you still draw breath. But Ned knew the truth. Even if he survived this wound, he would never return to what he once was. The Lannisters had burned too much. The realm had swallowed too much of his honor. He looked to the horizon. The North must rise, he said. Not just for vengeance, but for survival, Robb nodded. Then we'll make them remember. Behind them, a raven circled in the sky, watching, waiting. In King's Landing, Cersei stood at the window of the Tower of the Hand, her face hard as stone. They've escaped, said Pycelle, wringing his hands. Cersei didn't flinch. Let them run, she said coldly. Let the wolves think they're free. She turned to Joffrey, who stood beside her, fuming. We'll hang the girl by the gates, he snarled. That'll bring them crawling back, but Cersei raised a hand. No, she said. We don't kill Sansa. Joffrey turned confused. Why not? Cersei smiled, a slow, cruel smile. Because we make her queen. The wind howled across the north like a wolf calling its pack home. Snow had begun to fall early that year, light at first, but persistent, as if the old gods themselves were reminding the realm that winter wasn't just coming. It was watching. Robb Stark rode hard across the muddy paths of the Neck, his father bundled in the saddle behind him, slipping in and out of fevered dreams. Grey wind kept pace beside the horse, growling low when crows circled too close. They had left Benjen behind, and there'd been no sign of him since. Whether he lived or died, Robb didn't know. But there was no time to look back. Not now. Each day Ned spoke less. The infection in his wound had spread, his skin pale, his body cold to the touch. But his eyes, when they opened, still held fire. And with every mile they rode, Robb felt the weight of something heavier than duty. He was not just Ned Stark's son anymore. He was the heir of the North. They reached a small keep just west of Moat Cailin, an old, forgotten outpost manned by loyal bannermen. Robb banged on the gate at midnight, and the men inside nearly fell over themselves at the sight of the Stark banner tied to his saddle. Maester Corlin, a wrinkled man with shaking hands but sharp eyes, treated Ned's wounds the best he could. He should be dead, the Maester whispered later. But the Starks, you lot are made of different blood. Robb stood by his father's bedside through the night, arms crossed, thoughts churning like a storm. He could still see Joffrey's smug face, Cersei's cold eyes. The Lannister lion tearing through everything they loved. He would never forget it. By morning, he summoned the ravens. Letters were sent to every corner of the north. To White Harbor, the Dreadfort, Bear Island, House Umber, House Mormont, House Glover. The north had gone quiet since Ned's imprisonment, but now the silence would end. The king in the north rides again, he wrote, and the wolves have returned to their den. Far away, in the twisted halls of the Red Keep, Sansa Stark stood in the queen's chambers, pale as milk. Cersei circled her like a lioness examining prey. Her handmaids said nothing. They only watched, wide-eyed, as their queen coiled closer. "You look so much like your mother," Cersei whispered, brushing a golden curl from Sansa's face. "It's a shame you were born to the wrong family." Sansa didn't respond. She had learned that lesson quickly. Words only gave Cersei more weapons. The queen reached into a small box on her vanity and pulled out a crown. Gold thin, delicate. It shimmered in the candlelight. "Do you know what this is?" Cersei asked. Sansa nodded slowly. "It's the crown of the queen consort." "Correct," Cersei smiled. "And soon it will be yours." Sansa's blood ran cold. "What?" "You'll marry Joffrey in a fortnight," Cersei said, voice sweet as poisoned wine. "You'll sit beside him, bear his children, smile for the people, and in return you'll get to live. Isn't that a fair trade?" Sansa's hands trembled at her sides. He murdered Septa Mordain. He had my father arrested. He tried to kill my brother." Cersei slapped her. Not hard, not to hurt. Just enough to remind her that truth had no power here. "You'll thank me for this one day," Cersei said. "You'll be queen, Sansa, and queens don't cry." Back in the north, the banners began to rise. Lord Greatjon Umber was the first to arrive at the keep. He stormed into the hall like a bear wearing iron and roared, "The wolves are howling again, boy!" Then came Mage Mormont with her daughters beside her. Then Lord Wyman Manderley, puffing from the ride but furious with fire in his gut. And then more, Glover, Reed, Serwyn. They came not for Ned, but for Robb. They saw a boy no longer. They saw a Stark with blood on his sword and fury in his heart. That night the great lords gathered under a sky full of stars. Robb stood before them, snow in his hair, a sword at his belt, his voice steady. "The South thinks the North is broken," he said. "That will bow to a boy king who murders fathers and threatens daughters." The lords growled in agreement, but they've forgotten who we are. The North remembers. Swords were raised to Robb Stark. Greatjon bellowed, "The young wolf! The king in the North!" Mormont cried. The cry spread like wildfire. "King in the North! King in the North!" Robb didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He only nodded. Somewhere inside the keep, Ned Stark opened his eyes and wept. The banners of the North cracked in the wind as Robb Stark stood atop the battlements of Moat Cailin, staring south. Below him, a sea of warriors stirred, 1,000 men at arms, 1,000 more in steel and leather, direwolves painted across shields and sewn into cloaks. Greatjon Umber roaring orders, Lady Mormont fierce and sharp-tongued. The Karstarks had joined with heavy cavalry and even House Bolton, though Rose's quiet, pale face gave Robb pause. Still, the North was rising. The old blood had not gone quiet after all. The land had remembered its wolves. Robb clenched the hilt of his sword. He had never led an army before. He had never ordered men to their deaths, but he had watched a false king try to kill his father, and he had heard the screams echoing through the Red Keep. That was enough. This war wasn't for honor anymore. It was for vengeance. And Sansa. He turned to the Maester, who had just delivered the latest raven. "Read it again," Robb ordered. The Maester cleared his throat, trembling slightly. "You will cease all northern movement immediately. Your sister, Sansa Stark, is betrothed to King Joffrey Baratheon. Should you persist in this foolish rebellion, the crown will take her head as the first of many." The hall went silent. Robb's knuckles turned white. He took the parchment and dropped it into the brazier. "Then they've given me no choice," he said coldly. "I'm marching on King's Landing." At the Red Keep, Sansa sat alone in her chamber, staring at the dress laid out before her. It was white and gold, meant for royalty. It shimmered under the candlelight, soft as silk. But it might as well have been sewn from chains. In 2 days, she would marry Joffrey, the boy who ordered her father's arrest, the boy who threatened her brother's life, the boy who once forced her to look at her father's head on a spike. And yet, they called it a wedding. She reached beneath the mattress and pulled out the note, a sliver of hope, barely a whisper. "The wolf lives. Robb comes for you. Stay strong." She didn't know if it was Varys or someone else. She didn't care. All that mattered was that her brother was alive and coming. She folded the note and tucked it back. Then she reached for a sewing needle and carefully began to stitch a message into the inside lining of her wedding dress. If she were paraded through the city, she wanted someone, anyone, to see it. The North remembers. "Save me." Back in the Riverlands, Robb's host thundered southward. They crossed the Twins, reluctantly allowed through by Walder Frey, who demanded a promise of marriage in return. Robb agreed, though he barely heard the old man's conditions. His mind was on the road ahead. The Lannisters had amassed their forces in the Westerlands, under the command of Tywin, but their eyes were not yet on Robb. They were too busy feasting on the corpse of the South. That was their mistake. Robb's wolves struck fast. Small towns fell. Lannister supply lines burned. One by one, the Red Lions were pulled off their thrones. At Oxcross, Robb launched a nighttime assault with the direwolves at the front. Grey wind tore through the camp like vengeance given form. Robb rode hard beside him. Swords soaked in blood by dawn. They called him the Young. Wolf, but the Lannisters began to whisper another name. The Butcher of Oxcross, because Robb left no prisoners, no more. Warnings, and he sent their heads south, in boxes marked with the Stark sigil. In King's Landing, Cersei read the latest raven with a clenched jaw. 3 Lannister lords dead, dozens missing. The Stark boy was winning. She stared across the room at Sansa, being fitted for her wedding gown, her face pale but calm, too calm. Cersei rose and walked over. "You look so serene, my dear." Sansa said nothing. "I suppose you think your brother's victories matter, that he's coming to rescue you." Cersei leaned in closer. "Let me tell you something. War doesn't save people. It only burns them." Sansa turned her head slowly, meeting the Queen's eyes. "Then perhaps it's time someone lit a fire under your throne." Cersei froze for a moment. Then she slapped her, harder this time. Sansa's head snapped to the side, but she didn't cry out. She didn't flinch. She just smiled. It was a small, sharp smile, one that said, "You're losing." That night, in the dungeons below the Red Keep, a shadow moved past the guards, unnoticed, a man with no face. He paused at a cell door. Inside, a blacksmith named Gendry sat in chains. "Time to go," the stranger whispered, and just like that, another piece of the North's game moved into place. The gates of King's Landing had never known fear. They had weathered the roar of dragons, the march of kings, the madness of fire. But never this, never the cold, unrelenting fury of the North. As dawn broke over the capital, the first horns sounded. Faint at first, like whispers on the wind. But they grew louder, deeper, until they echoed across the battlements and through the narrow streets. The guards atop the walls peered into the morning mist and saw them. A wall of shields, steel glinting like ice, banners snapping in the breeze. House Stark, hundreds, no, thousands, a slow, steady march, and in front of them rode Robb Stark, cloaked in furs, his eyes grim. At his side, grey wind padded through the mud. Blood dried into the beast's dark fur from the last battle. Behind him, Great Jon Umber bellowed a war cry. Roose Bolton, silent and pale, rode like a phantom, his flayed man banner trailing behind. The king in the north had come, but he hadn't come alone. From the shadows of the Blackwater emerged boats, long and narrow, manned by allies from the Riverlands and Iron Islands. Robb had struck a secret deal with a rogue faction of the Ironborn who resented Balon Greyjoy's madness. In exchange for gold and vengeance against the Lannisters, they had agreed to ferry Northmen into the city. King's Landing was surrounded. Inside the Red Keep, chaos bloomed. Tywin Lannister had not returned. Stannis Baratheon was still licking his wounds from Blackwater, and Joffrey was panicking. "They'll never dare attack," he screamed, throwing a golden goblet across the chamber. "They wouldn't dare." "I'm the king!" Cersei stood still, unmoved, her wine cup untouched. She had received word an hour earlier. Sansa Stark had vanished. No guards saw her leave. No servant spoke. But her chamber was empty, her wedding dress slashed and burned. A small scrap of cloth was left behind, stitched with red thread on the inside. "The North remembers." "Save me." Cersei crushed the note in her fist. "Find her," she ordered Sir Mandan. "And if you can't, find someone to bleed in her place." But even she knew. It was already too late. In the shadowed streets of Flea Bottom, Sansa Stark crouched in a cart of hay, dressed as a stable boy. Her red hair was hidden under a soot-blackened cap, her hands dirtied to the bone. Beside her sat Gendry, eyes sharp, hand on the hilt of a stolen blade. "You sure about this?" he asked. She nodded once. "I'm not waiting to be rescued. I'm going to walk out of this city on my own legs, or die trying." He grinned. "There's the wolf in you." A whistle pierced the air, a signal. Moments later, the cart rolled forward. Their path had been bought and bloodied. A faceless man had cleared the way, outside the walls. Robb raised his hand. Archers ready. The enemy stood poised on the walls. But they were uncertain, leaderless, disorganized. Rumors had spread through the ranks that Joffrey had ordered children executed, that Queen Cersei had poisoned a noblewoman, that the North was not here to take the city, but to punish it. The Lannister army had grown fat off of fear, and fear was now turning on them. "Catapults," Robb ordered. "Send them a message." The first stone flew, crashing into the upper levels of the city, not near the civilians, but near the Red Keep. The sound rang like thunder. Another followed, then another. Inside the throne room, Joffrey turned pale. "They're attacking." "No," Cersei said quietly. "They're warning us." And then the bells rang, not for surrender, not for worship, but for blood. From within the city, chaos erupted. A riot, rebels, hidden Northmen who had been smuggled in over the past month, began torching Lannister supply houses. Riots broke out. The gold cloaks, half bought by Varys and Littlefinger both, turned their cloaks inside out and walked away. The gates were no longer guarded. They were open. Robb didn't hesitate. "Forward!" The North charged. Steel clashed. Walls crumbled. The city screamed. In the streets, Gendry fought like a storm, dragging Sansa through the fire. She moved like someone who had already died and come back stronger. A lion guard tried to grab her. She jammed a broken bottle into his throat. They didn't stop. They moved toward the Northman banners in the square, toward freedom, toward home. Inside the Red Keep, Joffrey was hiding in the sept, crying. Cersei, standing beside the Iron Throne, sipped her wine and stared at the doors. She would not run, but when they finally burst open, it wasn't Robb who stepped through first. It was Ned, alive, pale, but standing. Behind him, Roose Bolton and 2 Northern bannermen. Joffrey screamed when he saw him. "You're dead!" "You're supposed to be dead." Ned said nothing. He walked straight to the throne, looked at it for only a second, and then turned his back on it. "I came for my daughter," he said, and as if summoned, the doors opened again, and Sansa ran into his arms. By nightfall, the Red Keep burned. The Lannisters who didn't kneel were slaughtered. Cersei was taken alive, Joffrey less so, and on the same Iron Throne where so many had lied, bled and died, Robb Stark refused to sit. "I don't want this city," he said. "Let them keep their throne of knives. The North will never bow again." Epilogue. They rode north as winter fell, leaving ashes behind them. Sansa by her father's side, Robb at the front. The North remembered, and this time it didn't forgive.